She rejected him 5 times, even though he was the richest and most dangerous man in the village. On his 6th attempt, the millionaire crossed the line between passion and revenge, and what came next was desire and guilt. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The bell of St. Bartholomew's Parish Church echoed through the Virginia morning as it had for decades, summoning the faithful to Sunday Mass. Emily Hayden walked along the uneven cobblestones of the main street, her steps measured and silent, the black veil partially covering a face that carried an almost ethereal beauty. At 26, she knew every house, every window, every secret whispered by the colonial walls of the small town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Her mother, Margaret, waited at the door of the 2-story house where the region's most respected tailoring shop operated. The 50-year-old woman's calloused hands still trembled slightly since the last episode, when she had inexplicably fainted while making a wedding dress. Emily had noticed how her mother avoided her gaze in those moments, as if carrying a weight that not all the prayers in the world could alleviate. "Emily, dear, we'll be late," murmured Margaret, adjusting her own veil with mechanical gestures. She always spoke softly, as if the whole world were a church where any word spoken too loudly might be considered profanation. The shop occupied the ground floor of the house, filled with mannequins dressed in mourning fabrics, plaster saints, with faces faded by time, and windows that filtered light in an almost mystical way. Emily had grown up between these walls, learning that beauty and suffering walked together, that each stitch carried a story of loss, hope, or resignation. As they walked to church, Emily felt the weight of neighbors' stares. It had always been this way. The most beautiful girl in Whitfield who had never dated, never been seen holding hands with any young man, never participated in town festivals where young people met and lost themselves behind the church. Her beauty was untouchable, almost religious, transforming her into a kind of local saint, admired from a distance but never truly reached. She couldn't explain why it was like this. There was something inside her, an invisible barrier that rose whenever a man approached with clearer intentions. A fragmented memory from when she was 8, of voices whispered behind the lace curtain in the living room, of her mother speaking with a man whose voice she never forgot, deep, authoritative, dangerous. That night after the stranger left, Margaret cried so much that Emily thought the world might end. St. Bartholomew's Church stood imposingly in the central square, its Baroque towers pointing toward the September sky that promised rain. Emily genuflected before the altar, her prayers always the same, for her mother's health, for the prosperity of the shop, for peace of soul. She never prayed for love. She didn't know how to ask for that which she feared finding. It was during communion that she saw him for the first time. Adam Blackwood sat in the last pew, wearing a dark suit that completely contrasted with the small-town environment. Tall, dark-haired, with features that seemed carved in marble, he observed the Mass with an attention that didn't seem devotional, but analytical, as if cataloguing each person, each gesture, each breath. When his eyes met Emily's, she felt something she had never experienced before, a warmth rising in her chest, a dizziness that made her grip the pew. He didn't look away. He simply studied her, with the patience of someone who has all the time in the world and the intensity of someone who knows exactly what he wants. Emily forced herself to look at the altar, but she could feel his eyes burning into her neck, awakening sensations that frightened and attracted her simultaneously. When Mass ended, Emily practically ran out of the church, pulling her mother by the arm. Margaret muttered something about unnecessary hurry, but Emily could no longer breathe properly inside that space. In the square, while greeting acquaintances with her usual politeness, she discreetly looked for the stranger. He had disappeared, like a mirage. "Who was that man in the last pew?" she asked Mrs. Wilson, the town's official gossip, who never missed a mass or a piece of news. "Oh, girl, didn't you know? He's the new owner of the old Prescott estate. They say he's from California. Very rich, bought the property to make what do they call it? A retreat. Lord knows what a man like that wants in a place like ours." The Prescott estate sat on the hilltop, a colonial mansion abandoned for decades after the family moved to Richmond. Emily had always looked at that building with a mixture of admiration and melancholy, imagining the stories its walls held. Now knowing that someone like Adam Blackwood inhabited it made the house seem alive again, but in a way that deeply disturbed her. That night, while embroidering a christening gown, Emily couldn't get the man out of her head. There was something in his eyes, a darkness that promised secrets, an intensity that suggested danger. She tried to pray, tried to focus on her work, but her hands trembled. Slightly, and several times she pricked herself with the needle. Margaret noticed her daughter's nervousness, but didn't comment. Since the stranger had arrived in town, she too had been restless, as if expecting something terrible about to happen. 3. Days later, Emily was at the farmer's market that took place every Wednesday in the square when she saw him again. Adam Blackwood walked among the fruit and vegetable stalls with the same displaced elegance of someone who doesn't belong to that world, but imposes himself through force of presence. Women whispered behind counters. Men measured him with distrust, disguised as curiosity. Emily pretended to concentrate on choosing tomatoes when he approached the neighboring stall, asking for information about regional spices with an accent that mixed California and something almost musical. His voice was even more disturbing up close, deep, controlled, carrying an authority that naturally made people bend to his will. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Emily directly. "Could you recommend where to find fresh chili peppers? I'm trying to adapt to local flavors." Emily looked up and again felt that wave of heat that destabilized her. Up close, Adam was even more impressive. Tanned skin, black hair slightly graying at the temples, an almost imperceptible scar on his chin. There was a mature, dangerous masculinity about him that made her feel simultaneously protected and threatened. "Mrs. Baker has the best ones," she replied, pointing to an elderly lady 3 stalls ahead. "But be careful, she's curious. She'll want to know your entire life story before selling you anything." Adam smiled, and Emily felt as if the world had stopped for a second. It was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but transformed his face in a devastating way. "Thank you. I'm Adam Blackwood, new resident of the Prescott estate, and you must be Emily Hayden, the most talented seamstress in the region." The fact that he knew her name both surprised and alarmed her. "How small towns keep few secrets," he said, taking another step closer, "especially when it comes to exceptional women." Emily felt her cheeks flush and hated herself for it. There was something in the way he looked at her that made her feel naked, exposed, as if he could read every thought, every fear, every secret desire she didn't even know she possessed. "I need to go," she murmured, picking up her shopping basket, with hands that trembled slightly. "Of course," said Adam, stepping back with the same feline elegance with which he had approached. "Perhaps we'll meet at the next Mass." Emily practically ran home, her heart beating uncontrollably. She found Margaret sitting on the porch, mechanically peeling potatoes, her eyes lost in the mountains surrounding the town. "Mom, that man, Adam Blackwood. Do you know him?" Margaret stopped peeling potatoes. For a moment her face paled in a way Emily had never seen before. The knife slipped from her hands and fell to the ground with a dry thud. "Why do you ask?" Her mother's voice came out strangled, as if the words cost her physical effort. "He spoke to me at the market. He knew my name, knew about the shop. It seemed strange." Margaret slowly stood up, picking up the knife with visibly trembling hands. "Emily, dear, there are people who carry the past on their backs like a burden. People it's better to avoid." "What past, Mom? What are you talking about?" But Margaret was already entering the house, murmuring prayers under her breath as she always did when she wanted to end a conversation. Emily remained on the porch, watching the mountains that seemed to guard secrets as old as the town's stones. That night, while sewing by lamplight, they had electric power, but Margaret preferred lamplight for delicate work. Emily heard her mother moving around in the bedroom. Nervous footsteps, drawers being opened and closed, murmurs that seemed like pleas. At 2 in the morning, when she was sure Emily was asleep, Margaret went down to the shop. Emily, who couldn't fall asleep, peeked through the door crack and saw her mother open an old trunk that was hidden behind the mourning fabrics. From inside, she took out a shoebox tied with red ribbon. Emily had never seen that box before. Margaret opened it with reverential care, like someone handling a sacred relic. Emily couldn't see the contents from where she was, but she could see her mother's face illuminated by the lamplight. There were tears streaming down her cheeks, and she whispered words Emily couldn't understand. Suddenly, Margaret took a photograph from the box and held it against her chest, rocking back and forth like a frightened child. Emily wanted to go, down, hug her mother, ask what pain was tearing her soul apart. But something kept her paralyzed at the top of the stairs. She sensed that if she went down at that moment, she would discover truths she might not be ready to face. The next morning, Margaret was normal again. She made coffee, sorted the day's work, greeted customers who arrived early with her usual cordiality. But Emily noticed that she avoided looking directly into her eyes, as if afraid her daughter might read, in her soul, the secrets she kept. All day long, Emily thought about the hidden box, her mother's tears, the reaction she had upon hearing Adam's name. There was a connection there, something linking the past to the present in a way she still couldn't understand. In the afternoon, when she went out to buy thread at the haberdashery, Emily saw Adam again. He was standing in front of the house, as if waiting for her. He wore dark pants and a white shirt that accentuated his tanned skin, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her stop in the middle of the sidewalk. "Emily," he said, and the way he pronounced her name made something contract inside her. "Can we talk?" Emily hesitated for a moment that seemed eternal. There was something in Adam's posture, in the way his hands remained relaxed along his body, that suggested infinite patience. As if he knew she would eventually yield, that it was inevitable. "About what?" she asked, maintaining a safe distance between them. "About why your mother turned pale when you mentioned my name. About why, every time I pass in front of your house, I see the curtain of the second-floor window move slightly. About why a woman like you has never been touched by any man in a town where everyone has known each other since birth." Adam's words fell on Emily like stones in still water, creating waves that spread to the edges of her soul. He knew about her virginity. He knew he was being watched. He knew much more than a stranger newly arrived should know. "How do you—" she began, but her voice failed. Adam took a step forward, and Emily could feel the heat emanating from his body, the masculine scent mixed with something darker, more dangerous. "Emily, I didn't come to Whitfield by chance. 27 years ago, my father was in this town. He did business here. Left, let's say, unfinished matters." Emily's heart began to beat so hard that she was sure he could hear it. 27 years. She was 26. The calculations added up in a way that terrified her. "What my father did here wasn't right," continued Adam, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I came to settle accounts, to pay debts, to finish what he started." "What kind of debts?" Emily's voice came out as a whisper. Adam smiled, but there was no joy in that smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Didn't your mother tell you about the man who visited her when you were little? The man who gave her money in exchange for silence?" Emily felt the world spin around her. The fragmented memories of her 8-year-old self began to reorganize like pieces of a macabre puzzle. The deep voice behind the lace curtain, Margaret's tears, the envelopes that mysteriously appeared every month for several years until they stopped coming when she turned 15. "You're lying," she said, taking a step back. "Am I?" Adam took a photograph from the inside pocket of his jacket. It was old, faded, but Emily could immediately recognize the pregnant woman who appeared, next to a dark-haired man with dark eyes and a predatory smile. The man had the same features as Adam, but was younger, crueler, and the pregnant woman was Margaret, 27 years younger. On the back of the photograph, masculine handwriting, "The debt is paid. Michael Blackwood, 1998. Emily snatched the photograph from Adam's hands, studying every detail as if her life depended on it. Margaret was pregnant with her in that photo, and the man who fathered her had the same last name as Adam. "No," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. "No, This can't be true." "Michael Blackwood was my father," said Adam, his voice now carrying an emotion he tried to control. "He came to the East Coast in the 90s to expand the family business. He met your mother, got involved with her, and when he discovered she was pregnant—" "Stop," Emily interrupted, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Please stop." But Adam didn't stop. He paid her to keep silent, to raise you away from any connection with our family, to make you believe you were the daughter of a ghost, father who never existed. Emily let the photograph fall to the ground, her knees weakening. Adam moved quickly, holding her by the arms before she fell. His touch burned her skin like a hot iron, but she didn't have the strength to pull away. "Why?" she asked, looking into the dark eyes she now knew were so similar to hers. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need to know," he said, his face dangerously close to hers. "I need to know if you are." "Your sister," Emily completed, the word coming out like a blasphemy. Adam closed his eyes for a moment, as if the possibility caused him physical pain. "When I learned of your existence, when I found this photograph among my father's papers after he died, I thought so. I came here to meet you, to fulfill a family obligation. But then," he opened his eyes, and Emily saw in them a vulnerability that completely contrasted with the coldness he had shown until then. "Then I saw you," he whispered, "and all I felt was desire. Desire and a need to possess you that has haunted me since the first moment. If you were my sister, Emily, I shouldn't feel the urge to touch you until you forget your own name. I shouldn't dream of you every night. I shouldn't be willing to burn the whole world just to have you in my arms." Emily couldn't breathe properly. Adam's words awakened sensations in her that she had been fighting to repress since she first saw him. The heat between her legs, the urgent need to be touched by those hands, the desire to lose herself in those dark eyes until she no longer knew where she ended, and he began. "I need to go," she said, trying to step away. But Adam held her more firmly, bringing his face closer to hers until their breaths mingled. "Emily, I need you to take a DNA test with me. I need to be sure we're not blood relatives, because if we're not, I'll make you mine in a way you'll never forget." The promise in his voice made something violently contract inside Emily. It was pure, primitive desire, which she didn't even know she was capable of feeling. But it was also terror, because she sensed that if she surrendered to Adam Blackwood, she would never be the same. "And if we are?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Adam smiled, but this time there was something broken in that smile. "If we are, I'll leave here and you'll never see me again. But before that, Emily, I'll make sure you're protected for the rest of your life, that you never need for anything, that you can forget I existed." Emily knew she should run away, lock herself in her house, forget everything she had just heard. But there was something stronger than fear pulsing inside her. It was curiosity, desire, and a desperate need to know the truth about her origin. "Where do we do this test?" she asked, sealing her fate with those 5 words. The private clinic in Richmond was a 2-hour drive from Whitfield. Adam insisted on picking her up in a black BMW that completely contrasted with the pickups and old cars circulating through town. Emily lied to her mother, said she was visiting a distant cousin, and hated herself for every word of the lie that came out of her mouth. During the trip, they barely talked. The silence in the car was dense, loaded with expectation and fear. Emily watched the familiar landscape give way to unknown roads through the window, each mile taking her further from the only life she had known. "Are you afraid of the result?" Adam asked when they were already approaching the capital. Emily took time to respond. "I'm afraid of what will happen after, regardless of the result." Adam looked at her through the rearview mirror, and Emily saw in his eyes the same restlessness she felt. "Emily, if we discover we're not related—" "Don't say it," she interrupted him. "Don't say anything before we know, please." He nodded, but Emily could feel the tension radiating from his body like heat from a fire. There was something primitive in the way Adam desired her, something that frightened and excited her at the same time. She had never been touched by a man, never felt what she was feeling, and the intensity of those sensations left her completely lost. The test was quick, clinical, impersonal. A nurse collected saliva samples from both with the efficiency of someone who repeated that procedure dozens of times a day. The result would be ready in a week. "A week," murmured Emily when they returned to the car. 7 days, confirmed Adam, starting the engine. "Emily, I want you to know that no matter what we discover, I'll take care of you. I'll ensure you're protected." "I don't want your protection," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. "I want the truth, all of it." Adam parked the car on the shoulder and turned to face her completely. "Are you sure about that? Because the truth, Emily, may be dirtier than you imagine. My father wasn't a good man. My family's business wasn't always legal." "What kind of business?" "Mining, oil, energy, government contracts obtained through bribery, elimination of competitors who became inconvenient. My father built an empire on blood and silence." Adam ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that revealed a vulnerability he rarely showed. "When he died last year, I found a list of names in his papers, people who knew too much, who could compromise the family. Your mother's name was on that list." Emily felt her blood freeze in her veins. "What does that mean?" "It means that Margaret knows much more about my father than a simple affair. It means that the money he sent to you wasn't just child support." Adam hesitated, as if the next words cost him physical effort. "It means your mother may have been complicit in crimes I prefer not to imagine." Emily opened the car door and got out, needing fresh air to process what she had just heard. Adam followed her, and they stood at the roadside, the mountain wind playing with her hair in a way that made her look even more ethereal. "My mother is not a criminal," said Emily, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Maybe not by choice," Adam replied, approaching her slowly. "Maybe she was forced to collaborate. Maybe she did what she did to protect you." Emily began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face like rain on a window. Adam extended his hand to touch her face, hesitated for a moment, then withdrew his hand as if it burned. "No," he whispered, "I can't touch you, not until we know." But Emily took a step forward, reducing the distance between them. "And what if I don't care? What if I want you to touch me, regardless of what we discover?" Adam closed his eyes, his fists clenching as if he were fighting against himself. "Emily, you don't understand. If we're blood relatives and I touch you, I won't be able to stop. I'll want more and more until I destroy us both. And if we're not related, what will happen then?" Adam opened his eyes, and Emily saw in them a darkness that made her tremble. "If we're not, I'll make you forget there's a world beyond my arms. I'll touch you until you scream my name like a prayer. I'll possess you in such a complete way that you'll carry the mark of my body on yours forever." Adam's words awakened something primitive inside Emily. She could feel the heat spreading through her body, an urgent need that frightened her in its intensity. She had never imagined she could feel something like this, never known that desire could be so overwhelming. "Adam," she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a plea. He took a step back, visibly fighting against what he wanted to do. "No, not now. 1 week, Emily. Give me 1 week to discover the truth. After that." "After that?" "After that, if we're free to love each other, I'll make you mine in a way that will compensate for every second of this wait." The return trip to Whitfield was even more silent than the outbound journey. Emily closed her eyes and pretended to sleep, but her mind was in turmoil. She thought of her mother, of the secrets Margaret had kept for so long, of the possibility that her entire life was built on a lie. When they arrived in town, it was already night. Adam stopped the car in front of Emily's house, but didn't turn off the engine. "Emily," he said as she was about to get out, "promise me one thing. Don't confront your mother about this yet. Not until we have the test result." "Why?" "Because if she knows we've discovered the truth, she might try to run away. Or worse." Adam held her arm lightly, the touch sending waves of heat throughout her body. "Please. Trust me." Emily nodded. So even knowing it would be almost impossible to pretend normalcy in front of Margaret, she got out of the car and climbed the stairs to the house, feeling Adam's eyes burning into her back until he drove away. Margaret was waiting for her in the living room, sewing a black dress by lamplight. When Emily entered, she looked up, and for a moment, Emily was certain her mother could read on her face everything that had happened that day. "How was the visit to your cousin?" asked Margaret, but there was something tense in her voice. "It was good," Emily lied. "I'm tired, I'm going to bed." When she was climbing the stairs, she heard her mother whisper a prayer, but it wasn't an ordinary prayer. It was a desperate plea, as if Margaret were asking forgiveness for sins she had carried in her soul for decades. The first 3 days of waiting were a silent hell. Emily tried to maintain a normal routine. Wake up early, help in the shop, attend to customers, sew until late, but each movement seemed mechanical, as if she were a wind-up doll performing empty gestures. Margaret noticed her restlessness but didn't ask questions. Between them was a dense silence, loaded with untold truths that seemed to suck the air from the house. Adam didn't appear in those 3 days. Emily didn't see him at Sunday Mass, didn't meet him in the streets, didn't hear news of him through local gossip. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth, leaving only the echo of his words reverberating in her mind. "I'll make you mine in a way that will compensate for every second of this wait." On the 4th night, Emily was embroidering a First Communion dress when she heard footsteps on the porch. Margaret had gone up to sleep an hour ago, but the footsteps were too light to be hers. Emily set aside the sewing and approached the living room window, slightly pulling back the curtain. A woman was standing on the porch, tall, elegant, wearing a dark suit and high heels that seemed completely out of place in the small town. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and even in the dimness of night, Emily could see that she possessed a cold, calculated, dangerous beauty. The woman knocked on the door 3 times, with the same precision with which everything else in her appearance seemed to have been planned. Emily hesitated. It was almost 10 at night, a time when no one made visits in Whitfield, but there was something in the stranger's posture that suggested urgency, something that made her open the door even against her better judgment. "Emily Hayden?" The woman's voice was polite, but there was an accent in it that Emily couldn't identify. Argentinian, perhaps Spanish. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Victoria Ramirez. I'm a lawyer, and I need to talk to you about Adam Blackwood." The woman studied Emily's face with eyes that seemed to catalogue every expression, every reaction. "May I come in?" Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way Victoria pronounced Adam's name that suggested intimacy, possession, jealousy, barely disguised. "It's very late for visits," said Emily, keeping the door only partially open. "What I have to tell you can't wait until tomorrow." Victoria opened an expensive leather briefcase and took out a photograph. "Do you recognize this man?" Emily took the photograph and almost dropped it. It was Adam, but younger, perhaps 5 years ago. He was embracing Victoria herself on a paradisiacal beach, both smiling, she wearing an engagement ring that even in the photograph seemed very expensive. "Were..." Emily couldn't finish the sentence. "Engaged," completed Victoria, entering the house without being invited. "For 3 years, until he discovered some information about his past and decided he had family issues to resolve in the East Coast." Emily closed the door and turned to face the woman who had invaded her house and, apparently, her life. Victoria observed the shop with critical eyes, as if evaluating the value of each object, each piece of furniture, each fabric. "What do you want?" asked Emily, struggling to keep her voice firm. "To save you," replied Victoria, sitting in a chair without being invited. "Emily, you have no idea who Adam Blackwood really is, what he's capable of, the things he's done in the name of family business." "He already told me about his father's business." Victoria laughed, a joyless sound that echoed through the room like the trill of a wounded bird. "The father? Darling, Adam is not just heir to the Blackwood empire. He's the brain behind every operation. The father was just the public face, the scapegoat. When Michael died, it wasn't an accident. It was Adam who eliminated him because the old man was getting careless, attracting too much attention from the international press. Emily felt the floor move beneath her feet. "You're lying." "Am I?" Victoria took a thick envelope from her briefcase. "These are photos, documents, recordings of conversations, evidence that Adam killed his own father, eliminated 3 business competitors in the last 2 years, and bribes authorities in 5 different countries." Emily didn't want to take the envelope, but Victoria left it on the sewing table anyway. "Why are you showing me this?" asked Emily. "Because I know why he came after you." Victoria leaned forward, her blue eyes shining with an almost feverish intensity. "Adam discovered that you might be his half-sister, and that excites him. He has, let's say, tendencies that aren't normal. The more forbidden, the more he desires it. If you're blood relatives, he won't leave you in peace. He'll possess you until he completely destroys you. And if we're not related, if you're not, he'll kill you after he gets tired of you, like he did with the others." Victoria took more photographs from the briefcase. These 3 women were involved with Adam in the last 5 years. All died in convenient accidents after he lost interest. Emily looked at the photographs with growing horror. 3 young, beautiful women with a sparkle in their eyes that suggested life, hope, love, all dead. "You're very similar to them," observed Victoria. "Dark-haired, innocent, of humble origin. Adam has a type, and you fit perfectly into the profile. Why should I believe you?" Emily stood up, walking to the window to try to organize her thoughts. "You could be making all this up because you still love him and can't accept that he's interested in someone else." Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, more vulnerable. "You're right. I still love him. Even knowing everything he's done, even knowing he's a monster, I love him in a way that destroys me every day." She stood up and walked to Emily. "But that doesn't make what I just told you a lie. Adam is dangerous, Emily. And if you don't run now while you still can, you'll end up like these other women." Emily felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. Part of her wanted to believe Victoria was lying, that all of this was the fruit of jealousy and revenge. But there was something in the woman's desperate sincerity that made her doubt her own certainties about Adam. "What do you want me to do?" "Come with me, tonight. I have a car waiting at the town entrance. I can take you anywhere in the world where he can't find you." Victoria took Emily's hand, and her fingers were as cold as ice. "Please, Emily, don't make the same mistake I made. Don't fall in love with a man who can kill you as easily as he makes love." Emily looked at the photographs spread on the table, at the envelope that contained evidence that could forever destroy her image of Adam. Then she looked at Victoria, seeing in her eyes the reflection of her own fear. "I need time to think," she finally said. Victoria nodded, but Emily could see the disappointment on her face. "Very well. But don't take too long, Emily. Adam returns tomorrow with the DNA test result, and after that it may be too late for any choice." When Victoria left, leaving only the expensive perfume and the envelope of evidence, Emily locked herself in the house and cried until she had no more tears. She no longer knew who to believe, no longer knew what was truth and what was lie. The only certainty left was that, the next morning, she would have to face Adam Blackwood, knowing he could be her brother, her love, or her murderer. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat at the bedroom window watching the estate on the hilltop, imagining Adam inside, perhaps also sleepless, counting the hours until dawn. The envelope Victoria had left remained untouched on the dresser, but its presence filled the room like an accusing ghost. At 6 in the morning, when the first rays of sun tinged the mountains gold, Emily saw the black BMW descending the hill. Her heart raced, mixing anticipation and terror in a combination that left her nauseated. Adam was returning, with the result that would define not only who they were to each other, but who she was to herself. She went down to the shop, pretending to organize fabrics, trying to seem normal when Margaret appeared for breakfast. But her hands trembled when holding the cup, and she spilled sugar on the table twice. "Emily, dear, what happened to you?" asked Margaret, observing her daughter with growing concern. "Since yesterday you've been strange pale. Are you sick?" "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." Margaret didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. There was a tension in the air that they both felt, like the electricity that precedes a storm. At 10 in the morning, Emily heard footsteps on the porch. Firm, masculine, unmistakable footsteps. Adam. She got up from the sewing machine where she pretended to work, smoothed the blue dress she had carefully chosen, neither too elegant nor too simple, and went to open the door. Adam stood there, wearing a white shirt and dark pants, holding a white envelope in his hands. His eyes met hers immediately, and Emily saw in them a mixture of relief, desire, and something that looked like victory. "Emily," he said, and his voice was hoarser than normal. "I need to talk to you alone." Emily looked over her shoulder. Margaret had discreetly disappeared to the back of the house, as if sensing that this conversation wasn't for her ears. "The result arrived," said Adam, raising the envelope. Emily felt her legs weaken. "And?" Adam took a step into the house, closing the door behind him. He approached Emily slowly, like a predator who can finally claim his prey. "We're not blood relatives, Emily." His voice was low, controlled, but there was an intensity in it that made the air vibrate around them. "You're not my father's daughter. We're not siblings. We are free." Emily felt the world spin around her. Relief, terror, desire, and confusion mixed inside her in an emotional storm that left her groundless. How is that possible? The photograph was real. My father was here, met your mother, had a relationship with her. But you're not his daughter. Adam came closer until he was just a few inches away. Your mother was pregnant with another man when she met Michael. My father discovered this later, but continued sending money anyway. Why? Because Margaret knew things about his business, things that could destroy our family if they became public. Adam raised his hand, almost touching Emily's face, then let it fall. The money was purchased silence, Emily, not paternity. Emily felt a mixture of relief and anger. So, my mother. Your mother did what she had to do to protect you, to ensure you grew up safe, away from the dangers surrounding my family. Adam finally touched her face, his fingers caressing her cheek with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his eyes. "And now you are mine." His touch sent waves of heat throughout Emily's body. It was the first time a man touched her that way, with desire and possession mixed in a caress that promised much more. "Adam, she began, but he placed his finger on her lips. "Shh, don't say anything now. Just let me look at you knowing I can touch you without sin, that I can desire you without guilt." Emily closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation of his fingers, tracing invisible lines on her face. But suddenly Victoria's words echoed in her mind like an alarm cry. "Adam," she said, moving slightly away. "I need to ask you something." He frowned, noticing the change in her tone. "What is it?" Emily took a deep breath, knowing that the next words could change everything between them. "Last night a woman came here, Victoria Ramirez. She said things about you." Adam's face transformed instantly. The tenderness disappeared, replaced by a coldness that made Emily tremble. "What kind of things?" "She said you were engaged, that you killed your father, that you eliminate people who become inconvenient." Emily held the envelope Victoria had left. "She brought me evidence." Adam looked at the envelope, then at Emily, and something dangerous gleamed in his eyes. "Is she still in town?" "I don't know." "Why? Is what she said true?" Adam was silent for a long moment, as if carefully calculating each word he would say next. "Victoria was my fiancée," he finally admitted. "And yes, she's here out of jealousy, trying to destroy any chance I have of being happy with you. But what about the rest? About your father, about the other women?" "Emily," said Adam, taking her hands and holding them firmly, "do you really believe I would be capable of hurting you? That I would travel halfway across the country? That I would wait a whole week agonizing over our family relationship, just to kill you afterward?" Emily looked into his eyes, searching for signs of lies, of danger, of anything that would confirm Victoria's accusations. But all she saw was desire, need, and something that seemed desperately close to love. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. Then believe this, said Adam, pulling her close and sealing her lips with a kiss that caught her completely by surprise. It was her first kiss, and its intensity almost knocked her down. Adam kissed like he did everything, with precision, dominance, and a passion that seemed capable of setting the world on fire. Emily felt her legs weaken, felt a liquid heat spreading through her body, felt lost in a sensation that was at once terrifying and perfect. When he pulled away, they were both breathless. "Do you feel that?" asked Adam, his forehead resting against hers. "That connection between us? That's not a lie, Emily. That can't be faked." Emily was dizzy, lost, completely surrendered to the sensations the kiss had awakened in her. But a rational part of her mind still struggled. The evidence Victoria brought could be forged, could be real, but taken out of context. Victoria is a lawyer, Emily. She knows how to manipulate documents, how to make lies seem like truths. Adam held her face with both hands. "The only truth that matters is this. I would never hurt you. Never." Emily wanted to believe. Every fiber of her being wanted to surrender completely to this man who made her feel things she didn't know existed. But prudence, cultivated by years of silence and secrets at home, prevented her from completely abandoning herself. "I need time," she finally said. Adam nodded, but Emily could see the frustration in his eyes. "How much time?" "I don't know. A few hours. Maybe until tomorrow." "Very well," said Adam, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that melted her. "But Emily, while you decide, I want you to know one thing. I'm not giving up on you. I won't let Victoria or anyone else separate us. You are mine, and I am yours. That's how it has to be." After he left, Emily stood in the middle of the shop, touching her lips still swollen from the kiss, trying to organize her thoughts in a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Margaret appeared from the back of the house, looking at her daughter, with an expression of deep sadness. "Emily," she said in a low voice, "I think the time has come for you to know the whole truth." Margaret approached the trunk hidden behind the mourning fabrics with the slowness of someone carrying the weight of decades of silence. Emily followed her, her heart still racing from the sensations Adam's kiss had awakened, but now seized by a different anxiety. The truth her mother had guarded for so long was about to come to light. "Sit down, dear," said Margaret, taking out the shoebox tied with red ribbon that Emily had seen on that sleepless night. "What I'm going to tell, you will change everything you think about your origin, about me, about why we live in this small town away from everything." Emily sat in a low chair watching her mother's trembling hands undo the ribbon's bow with reverential care. From inside the box, Margaret took out yellowed photographs, folded and refolded letters, documents that appeared official, and a small old tape recorder. "In 1997, I worked as a seamstress in a mansion in Richmond, the house of the Mitchell family, important mining entrepreneurs. I was young, single, and thought the whole world was waiting for me." Margaret held a photograph where she appeared 20 years younger, smiling, standing next to an elegant woman. "The lady of the house, Mrs. Elizabeth Mitchell, was kind to me. She treated me almost like a daughter." Emily took the photograph, studying her mother's radiant face. It was difficult to reconcile that hopeful young woman with the reserved and melancholic woman she knew. "It was in that house that I met Michael Blackwood. He came frequently for business meetings with Mr. Mitchell. He was charming, powerful, and courted me like no man had ever done." Margaret took out another photograph, Michael Blackwood at an elegant dinner, his arm possessively around a dazzled Margaret. "I was foolish, Emily. I believed when he said he loved me that he would marry me." "But you got pregnant with another man," said Emily, remembering what Adam had told her. Margaret slowly shook her head. "No, dear, I got pregnant with Michael himself. You are his daughter." Emily felt the floor collapse beneath her feet. "But the DNA test you both took was correct. You're not Adam's sister." Margaret took a deep breath, as if the next words were torn from her soul. "Because Adam is not Michael Blackwood's son." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily tried to process what she had just heard, but the words didn't make sense. "I don't understand," she whispered. Margaret turned on the old tape recorder. The voice that came out of it was weak, distorted by time, but recognizable as Michael Blackwood's. Margaret, you need to understand. The boy can't know the truth. He believes he's my son, and that's better this way. For him, for the family, for all of us. You'll take your daughter far away. You'll raise her safely, and you'll never tell anyone that she has Blackwood blood in her veins. Emily felt nausea rising in her throat. Adam isn't his son? Adam was adopted when he was 2 years old. Michael and his wife couldn't have children, so they took a Californian orphan and raised him as if he were their own blood. Margaret turned off the recorder, tears flowing freely down her face. Michael told me this one night when he was drunk, a few months before you were born. He said he was tired of pretending to love that boy as a son. But then Adam and I. You have no relationship whatsoever, neither on the father's side nor on the mother's side. Adam doesn't know. He was adopted, Emily. He grew up believing he was the legitimate heir to the Blackwood Empire. Margaret held her daughter's hands. And you are Michael's true daughter, the true heiress. Emily stood up abruptly, walking around the room in a desperate attempt to organize her thoughts. Why did you never tell me? Why did you let me grow up without a father, without knowing who I was? Because Michael threatened me, said if I told the truth to you or to anyone, he would kill us. That he would make it look like an accident, like so many others that happened to people who knew too much about his business. Margaret took an official document from the box. But before he died last year, he changed his will. He left half his fortune to you, Emily. Half of everything Adam thinks is just his. Emily took the document with trembling hands. It was indeed a will, recognizing her as Michael Blackwood's legitimate daughter and leaving her an inheritance worth millions of dollars. Does Adam know this? I don't know. The lawyer who brought me the document said there was a copy in the family archives, but that perhaps it hadn't been discovered yet. Margaret stood up, approaching her daughter. Emily, dear, you need to understand. Adam may not know he was adopted, but he found out about you. That's why he came here, not for love, not for destiny. He came because he discovered there's a legitimate heiress who can claim half of everything he considers his. Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. All of Adam's sweet words, all the intense looks, the kiss that had made her feel alive for the first time. It could all be a lie. It could all be an act to seduce her, gain her trust, perhaps even eliminate her as Victoria had suggested. But he said he desired me since he saw me, she murmured, more to herself than to her mother. And maybe that's true. Maybe he really desires you, but that doesn't change the fact that you represent a threat to his interests. Margaret held her daughter's face with both hands. Emily, you need to decide what to do. With this information, you can claim your inheritance and become one of the richest women in the country, or you can pretend you never knew anything and continue living our simple life here. And if I choose the inheritance, then you'll have to face Adam. And from what I know about the Blackwood family, that's not an easy battle to win. Emily sat down again, her head spinning with all the revelations. She was Michael Blackwood's daughter. She had a right to an incalculable fortune. Adam wasn't her brother, but he also wasn't who he thought he was, and everything between them could be based on lies and financial interests. Mom, why are you telling me this now? Because I saw the way you look at him, and I saw the way he looks at you. Whatever is happening between you two, it's getting too serious to continue based on lies. Margaret put the documents back in the box. And because, if something happens to me, you need to know who you really are. Why would something happen to you? Margaret hesitated, then took a recent letter from the box. Because I've been receiving these. Emily took the letter and read it quickly. It was a veiled threat, suggesting that Margaret should keep her mouth shut about matters of the past or face the consequences. It wasn't signed, but the expensive ink and letterhead suggested an important origin. When did you start receiving these letters? Last week, right after Adam arrived in town. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, too much coincidence to be casual. At that moment, they heard a strong knock on the door. authoritative, impatient knocks that made both women stiffen with fear. "Open the door," said a male voice from outside. It wasn't Adam, it was someone Emily had never heard before, but whose authority made her mother turn instantly pale. "Who is it?" whispered Emily. "Trouble," replied Margaret, quickly putting the documents back in the box. "Trouble I hoped never to face again." Margaret quickly hid the box behind the fabrics, but her hands were trembling so much she almost dropped it. Emily had never seen her mother so terrified, and that frightened her more than any external threat. "Margaret Hayden, we know you're in there," said the male voice, now more impatient. "We have a business proposal for your daughter." Emily approached the window and peeked through the curtain. Two men in dark suits were on the porch, both wearing sunglasses despite it being cloudy. They had the rigid posture and threatening presence of people accustomed to getting what they wanted through intimidation. "Don't open it," whispered Margaret. "Please, Emily, don't open it." But Emily was already walking toward the door. Something inside her, perhaps the newly discovered courage of knowing who she really was, perhaps the anger at having been kept in the dark for so long, impelled her to face whatever threat was on the other side. "What do you want?" she asked through the closed door. "We want to talk about your inheritance, Miss Blackwood," replied one of the men, and the way he pronounced her true surname made Emily shiver. "About the complications your existence may bring to certain interested parties." Emily opened the door, keeping it partially closed with her body. The two men were older than she had imagined, perhaps in their 50s, with faces that suggested lives spent in activities they preferred to remain in the shadows. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. The taller man smiled, an expression that didn't come close to his eyes. "Of course you do. Your mother just told you about Michael Blackwood's will, didn't she? About your true identity." Emily felt her blood freeze. How did they know? "Ah, don't be surprised," continued the man, noticing her expression. "We represent certain interests in the Blackwood family. It's our job to know everything that can affect the family's assets. And what does that have to do with me?" "Everything," said the second man, coming closer. "You see, miss, your existence represents a legal problem for the current heir. Adam Blackwood believes he's the sole beneficiary of the family fortune. Discovering there's a legitimate sister who has a right to half of everything can be disturbing for him." "You work for Adam?" The men exchanged glances as if sharing a private joke. "Let's say we work to maintain the stability of Blackwood business, and your inheritance claim wouldn't be stable for anyone." Emily felt Margaret approach behind her, radiating fear like the heat of a fever. "What are you proposing?" asked Emily. "A simple transaction," said the first man, taking an envelope from his pocket. "Inside this envelope is a check for $2 million. Enough for you and your mother to live comfortably for the rest of your lives, far from here. In exchange, you sign a formal renunciation of any right to the Blackwood inheritance." Emily looked at the envelope, then at the men's faces. "And if I refuse?" "We don't believe you're that imprudent," said the second man, his voice carrying a subtle but unmistakable threat. "Accidents happen, Miss Blackwood, especially to people who insist on complicating situations that should remain simple." At that moment, Emily heard the familiar roar of Adam's BMW approaching. The two men also heard it and immediately stiffened. "You have until noon tomorrow to decide," said the first man quickly, leaving the envelope on the porch. "If we don't receive a positive response by then, we'll take other measures." They left, quickly passing Adam, who was climbing the porch steps. Emily saw Adam observe them with attention, his face closing in an expression of suspicion and anger. "Who were they?" asked Adam, as soon as he reached the door. Emily picked up the envelope from the porch, examining it. There was no sender, just her name written in elegant calligraphy. "Men who say they work to maintain the stability of Blackwood business," she replied, looking directly into his eyes. "Men who know about my inheritance." Adam's face went white. "What inheritance?" Emily took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change everything between them forever. "The inheritance that my father left me. Half of everything you think is yours." Adam stood motionless for a long moment, as if he had been shot. Then, slowly, he entered the house and closed the door behind him. "Explain," he said, his voice dangerously low. Emily told everything, about Margaret's revelation, about the will, about the fact that she was Michael's legitimate daughter while he was adopted. As she spoke, she saw Adam's expression transform, going from shock to anger, then to something that seemed like devastation. "You're telling me I'm not a Blackwood by blood," he said finally. "You're telling me you came here knowing about the inheritance," replied Emily. "That everything between us was a lie to seduce me and make me give up what is rightfully mine." Adam took a step forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that made Emily step back. "Do you really believe it was all an act? That what I feel, for you, that what happens between us when we touch, is a lie?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," said Emily, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Victoria brought me evidence that you're a murderer. My mother revealed that you're not who you think you are. Threatening men appear at my door offering money for me to disappear. How can I know what's true?" Adam came closer, holding her face with both hands, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Because this is true," he said, kissing her with a desperation that took Emily by surprise. It was different from the first kiss. There was urgency in it, hunger, something close to despair. Emily felt herself melting, losing herself in the sensation of his lips, in the way his hands traveled over her face and tangled in her hair. When they separated, both were breathless. "Emily," said Adam, his forehead resting against hers, "I didn't know about the inheritance when I came here. I came because I found your name on a list of people my father considered dangerous. I came to discover what threat you represented. But the moment I saw you, everything changed." "How can I be sure of that?" "Because I'll give up the inheritance," he said, completely surprising her. "All the money, all the businesses, everything. You can have your legitimate part, I won't dispute it. The only thing I want is you." Emily studied him, looking for signs of lies, of manipulation. But all she saw was raw sincerity, vulnerability that she knew he rarely showed. "And the men who were here? The threats?" Adam's face hardened. "They don't work for me. They work for the company's board of directors, men who have a lot to lose. If the power structure changes," he held her hands, "Emily, you're in danger. Powerful people want you to disappear and they won't stop at bribes. What do you want me to do? Come with me tonight. We can go anywhere in the world, resolve this inheritance issue through lawyers far from here." Adam kissed her hands. "I'll protect you, Emily. I won't let anyone hurt you." Emily looked at Margaret, who had watched the entire conversation in silence. Her mother nodded slowly, as if finally finding peace with a decision she had been postponing for years. "Go, dear," said Margaret. "Go and be happy. You deserve a better life than this." Emily looked at Adam, at the man who made her feel alive, and terrified her at the same time. She knew that if she went with him, there would be no return. Her life in Whitfield, the safety of the familiar routine, everything would be left behind forever. "I'll go," she finally said, "but with one condition." Adam waited, his eyes fixed on Emily's face, as if her answer would determine not only their future, but his very existence. "What condition?" he asked. "I want you to show me who you really are," said Emily, her voice firm despite the tears. "Not the Blackwood heir, not the man Victoria described, not the version you think you need to be to protect me. I want to know Adam, just Adam. Without masks, without lies, without secrets." Adam closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words had touched something deep and painful inside him. "Emily, you don't understand. If I show who I really am, you might not like what you'll see." "Then give me the chance to choose with full knowledge," she replied. "Give me the chance to love you for what you are, not for what you pretend to be." Margaret approached, touching her daughter's shoulder. "Emily, dear, you need to leave soon. Those men won't wait long, and Whitfield isn't safe while you're here." Adam nodded. "Your mother is right. We have a few hours at most, before they actively start looking for you." "My mother comes with us," said Emily, surprising both Adam and Margaret. "Emily, no," protested Margaret. "This is your chance to be free, to have the life I always deserved for you. I'll just get in the way." I won't leave you here to face the consequences alone. If they can't find me, they'll use you to force me to return. Emily held her mother's hands. All three of us go. It's that way or no way. Adam studied the two. Women then slowly nodded. Very well, but we need to leave town tonight without telling anyone. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of silent preparations. Emily packed only the essentials, including some special fabrics and sewing tools Margaret insisted on taking. Adam made several calls in Spanish, organizing documents and bank transfers that would allow them to completely disappear from the radar. When the sun began to set behind the mountains, transforming the sky into a canvas of oranges and purples, Adam parked a different car, a discreet black sedan, in front of the house. "Where did you get this car?" asked Emily. "I have my resources," he replied, loading the luggage. "Emily, I need you to understand. From the moment we enter this car, there's no going back. Your life in Whitfield ends here." Emily looked at the house where she had grown, up at the shop where she had learned to sew, at the narrow streets where she had walked for 26 years. She was leaving behind not just a place, but an entire identity. "I'm ready," she said. During the first hour of travel, they maintained silence. Margaret dozed in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional stress of the day. Emily watched the familiar landscape give way to unknown roads, each mile taking her further from the only life she had known. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "To a property of mine on the Outer Banks, isolated, secure, far from anything related to Blackwood business." Adam looked at her through the rearview mirror. "There, we'll have time to resolve the inheritance issue and to really get to know each other." There was something in the way he said the last words that made Emily feel a familiar warmth spreading through her body. The anticipation of what could happen between them, away from all the obstacles and secrets, left her both excited and nervous. Around midnight, they stopped at a simple inn to rest. Adam reserved 2 rooms, one for Margaret, another for Emily. He would stay in the living room, he said, standing guard. But when Emily lay down on the narrow bed in the modest room, she couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing too much, her body too restless. At 2 in the morning, she got up and left the room, finding Adam sitting in an armchair in the living room, looking out the window. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning. "No. And you?" "I never sleep when I'm protecting someone important." Adam turned to face her, and Emily saw in his eyes a vulnerability he rarely showed. "Emily, about what you asked. About showing you who I really am." "What about it?" Adam stood up, approaching her slowly. "I'm not a good man. I've done things I'm not proud of. For money, for power, for survival. Victoria wasn't completely lying about me." Emily felt her heart speed up, but not from fear. There was something in Adam's raw honesty that attracted her more than any superficial charm. "Tell me," she said. "I've killed men, Emily, not my father, that was a lie. But others, competitors who threatened the business, informants who knew too much, people who became problems." Adam stopped just a few inches from her. "I have blood on my hands, blood that will never completely come off." Emily raised her hand, touching his face with trembling fingers. "And Victoria, the other women. Victoria was real. I loved her, or thought I loved her, but it was a cold, calculated love based on mutual convenience." Adam closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "The other women, I desired them, I possessed them, but I never loved them, and when I tired of them, I sent them away with enough money to restart their lives far from me." "Did you kill them?" "No, Victoria lied about that, but I hurt them emotionally, used them until they no longer served my purposes." Adam opened his eyes, looking directly into hers. "That's what I am, Emily. A man who takes what he wants, who eliminates obstacles, who uses people. Do you still want to be with me knowing that?" Emily studied his face, seeing in it the painful sincerity of someone who was completely baring himself for the first time. There was violence in his past, yes, there was coldness, calculation, a capacity for cruelty that she couldn't ignore. But there was also the way he looked at her, as if she were the only pure thing in his corrupted world. There was the delicacy with which he touched her, as if she were made of glass. There was the willingness to give up his entire inheritance just to have her. "You know what scares me the most?" she finally said. "What?" "That nothing you just told me changes what I feel for you, that I still want you to touch me, to make me yours regardless of what you did in the past." Emily came closer until their bodies almost touched. "That scares me because it means maybe I'm not as innocent as I thought." Adam inhaled sharply, as if her words were a physical blow. "Emily, touch me," she whispered. "Show me who you are when you're not hiding behind masks." Adam hesitated for just a second before pulling her against him, kissing her with a passion that made her forget where she was, who she was, everything except the sensation of his lips, of his hands exploring her body with a hunger she had never imagined could exist. It was different from any previous kiss. There was a primitive urgency in it, a need that awakened something equally primitive inside her. Emily felt lost, consumed, completely surrendered to sensations that left her dizzy. When they separated, both were breathing heavily. "Not here," said Adam, his voice hoarse. "Not like this. When I make you mine, Emily, it will be in a place where I can dedicate the entire night to worshipping every inch of your body." The promise in his words made something violently contract inside Emily. It was pure anticipation, desire she didn't know she was capable of feeling. The next morning, they resumed the journey, but something fundamental had changed between them. Emily could feel Adam's eyes on her constantly, could see the promise in his gaze every time their eyes met. The sexual tension between them was almost palpable, an electric current that charged the car's air. When they finally arrived at the property on the Outer Banks, a modern and isolated house overlooking the sea, Emily knew that her true education was about to begin. The house on the Outer Banks was a perfect refuge, modern, discreet, with large windows overlooking the endless sea. Margaret settled into a room with a garden view, looking more relieved than she had been in years. For the first time since Emily could remember, her mother smiled with genuine tranquility. Adam spent the first 2 days organizing the legal aspects of the inheritance. Lawyers came and went, documents were signed, bank transfers were authorized. Emily observed everything with a mixture of fascination and incredulity. In a matter of 48 hours, she had become one of the richest women in America. "It's done," said Adam on the second night, finding Emily on the veranda overlooking the sea. "Half the Blackwood fortune is officially yours, $57 million to be exact." Emily almost choked on the wine she was drinking. 57 million and growing. The companies are very profitable. Adam sat beside her, watching the waves breaking on the sand under the full moon. "Emily, you'll never have to worry about money again. You'll never depend on anyone again. And you? Aren't you resentful about losing half of everything you considered yours?" Adam turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. "Emily, in these last few days, watching you discover your strength, seeing you make decisions about investments and business strategies as if you were born for it, I understood that you deserve all this much more than I do. You have Blackwood blood, but you also have something I never had." "What?" "Goodness, integrity, the ability to use power without being corrupted." Adam held her hand, kissing her fingers one by one. "You'll transform this empire into something better than my father ever dreamed." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. In the last few weeks, her entire life had irreversibly changed. From a seamstress in a small town to a multimillionaire heiress, from a woman who had never been touched to a woman desired by the most dangerous and fascinating man she had ever known. "Adam," she said, standing up and extending her hand to him, "you promised me an entire night to worship every inch of my body. Do you still intend to keep that promise?" Adam looked at the extended hand, then at her face, and Emily saw in his eyes a mixture of desire, reverence, and something that looked dangerously like love. "Are you sure?" he asked, standing up and intertwining his fingers with hers. "Emily, once I touch you completely, once I make you mine, there will be no going back. You will be mine forever." "And you will be mine," she replied, pulling him into the house. "Forever." The room Adam had chosen for Emily was spacious, with a king-size bed overlooking the ocean. He had scattered white rose petals on the sheets, lit aromatic candles that created a soft golden light, prepared champagne and fruits on a tray beside the bed. "You planned this," said Emily, smiling. "Since the moment I saw you in church, I've dreamed of this night." Adam closed the door behind them, approaching her slowly. "Emily, you need to tell me if you want me to stop. At any moment." She shook her head. "I won't want you to stop." Adam kissed her then, but different from any previous kiss. It was pure adoration, reverence, as if she were a goddess he was privileged to touch. His hands explored her body over her dress with a patience that drove her crazy with desire. When he slowly began to unbutton her dress, Emily felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that made her tremble. She had never been naked before a man, never felt masculine hands on her skin this way. "You're perfect," whispered Adam when the dress fell to the floor, leaving her only in white lingerie. "More perfect than any fantasy." He carried her to the bed with a delicacy that contrasted with his obvious strength, laying her on the rose petals, as if she were made of crystal. What happened next was a sensual education that lasted the entire night, Adam exploring every inch of her body with kisses, caresses, and a devotion that made her cry with pleasure several times. When he finally made her his, Emily felt as if she were being reborn. The initial pain gave way to a fullness she had never imagined could exist, a connection so deep it seemed to fuse their souls. They made love until dawn, discovering together the secrets of pleasure, learning each other's rhythms and silences. When they woke up entwined, with sunlight coming through the open windows, Emily knew she was no longer the same person. She had discovered not just physical love, but her own strength, her ability to make decisions that changed destinies. "Good morning, my queen," murmured Adam, kissing her neck. "Good morning, my king," she replied, turning in his arms. They were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Adam answered reluctantly, speaking in Spanish in a voice that gradually became tenser. When he hung up, his expression was somber. "What is it?" asked Emily. "Victoria and the boardmen found out where we are. They're coming here with a forged court order to arrest me for financial fraud." Adam got up, starting to dress quickly. "We have an hour, maybe less." Emily sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her body. "What do we do?" "You two flee. I have a boat at the marina, fake documents prepared. You can go anywhere in the world." Adam approached her, held her face with both hands. "Emily, I'll stay and face them. I can't spend my whole life running." "No," said Emily, getting up and starting to dress. "I won't let you face this alone." "Emily, be reasonable. They're dangerous." "And I'm a woman who just discovered she's worth $57 million, she interrupted, putting on her dress, "who has enough power to buy judges, hire security, destroy careers, who grew up in a family that knew how to keep lethal secrets." Adam stopped dressing, looking at her with growing admiration. "What are you suggesting?" Emily smiled, and there was something in that smile that resembled the calculated coldness he himself possessed. That it's time for them to discover they messed with the wrong person. In the next 2 hours, Emily made a series of calls that completely changed the course of events. Using her new financial resources and connections that Adam's lawyers provided, she hired a private security team, bribed the officials who were coming with the forged court order, and more importantly, publicly exposed the corruption of the Blackwood corporate board. When Victoria and the men in suits arrived at the property, they found an army of lawyers, security guards, and journalists waiting for them. The woman they thought they would find, a naive small-town seamstress, had transformed into a ruthless magnate who defeated them using their own weapons. "Impressive," said Adam, watching Victoria being escorted by the security guards while the boardmen were arrested for document forgery. "In a few hours you learn to play the game better than people who've been doing it for decades." "I had a good teacher," replied Emily, embracing him, "and powerful reasons to win." 6 months. Later, Emily and Adam got married in an intimate ceremony in a colonial church in Williamsburg, with Margaret as maid of honor. Emily wore a wedding dress she had sewn herself, combining her humble origin with her new status as one of the most powerful women in the country. They transformed the Blackwood Empire into a model company of sustainability and social responsibility, creating jobs in small towns like Whitfield, which became the headquarters of one of the largest solar energy projects in America. Emily never lost her essence. She still sewed in her spare time, still visited her mother every weekend, still remembered where she came from. But now she did all that as a woman who knew exactly who she was and the power she possessed. And on the warm nights of the Outer Banks, when Adam loved her with the same desperate passion as the first time, Emily knew she had found not just love but the most powerful and true version of herself. They had overcome all obstacles, familial, financial, emotional. They had transformed a forbidden love into a partnership that had changed their lives and the world around them. It was exactly the kind of happy ending that Emily had sown in dreams for 26 years, but had never imagined she would be strong enough to achieve. As the months passed, the Blackwood Empire continued to transform under Emily's influence. Where once there had been ruthless business practices and questionable ethics, she implemented transparency and genuine corporate responsibility. Adam, to everyone's surprise, embraced these changes wholeheartedly. His strategic mind, combined with Emily's moral compass, created a powerful partnership that competitors found impossible to match. The board members who had tried to threaten Emily were not only removed, but faced legal consequences for years of financial misconduct. Victoria eventually returned to California, her ambitions for revenge fading when she realized that Adam was truly transformed by his love for Emily. Before leaving, she sent a simple note that read, "He's different with you. Keep him that way." Margaret blossomed in her new life. No longer burdened by decades of secrets and fear, she established a small but exclusive design studio where she taught underprivileged girls the art of tailoring. The skills that had once been her only means of survival became her gift to a new generation. On their first anniversary, Adam surprised Emily with a trip to Paris. They strolled along the Seine, visited the great fashion houses, and spent hours in little cafes watching the world go by. In a small antique shop near Montmartre, Adam purchased a vintage sewing box from the 1920s, inlaid with mother-of-pearl and filled with golden thimbles and silver scissors. "For the woman who stitched together my broken pieces," he said, presenting it to her in their hotel suite overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Emily accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real," she confessed, "that we found each other against all odds." "We didn't just find each other," Adam replied, pulling her close. "We chose each other even when the choice seemed impossible." That night, as they made love with the lights of Paris twinkling beyond their windows, Emily felt the final threads of her old life falling away. The shy seamstress from Whitfield was gone forever, replaced by a woman who knew her own power and wasn't afraid to claim it. When they returned to the States, Emily discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both joy and fear. Joy at the prospect of creating a family with Adam, fear of the legacy they would pass to their child. "Will we tell him about his grandfather?" she asked Adam one night as they lay in bed, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "About the darkness in the Blackwood name?" Adam was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "We'll tell him the truth," he finally said, "that his grandfather made terrible choices, but that he also, in his final act, tried to right a wrong, and that without those choices, good and bad, we wouldn't exist. Our child wouldn't exist." Emily nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be learned from, transformed into something that might, in its own way, be redemptive. Their son was born on a stormy night in April, a robust baby with Adam's dark hair and Emily's clear eyes. They named him David, after Margaret's father, the only good man she had known in her early life. As Emily held her son for the first time, she felt a fierce protectiveness unlike anything she had ever experienced. "He will never know fear or shame," she whispered to the tiny face looking up at her. "He will never have to hide who he is." Adam Watching them from the edge of the bed, felt something he had believed impossible for most of his life: true peace. The restless ambition, the constant need to prove himself worthy of the Blackwood name, had dissolved in the face of this new family he had created. As David grew, it became clear he had inherited not only his parents' looks, but their complementary strengths. He had Adam's quick intelligence and Emily's deep empathy, a combination that made him extraordinary. By the time he was 5, he was already showing signs of the leader he would one day become. The Blackwood Empire continued to expand, but in ways Michael could never have imagined. Emily established a foundation that provided entrepreneurship, grants to women in small towns across America. Adam focused on sustainable energy projects that combined profit with genuine environmental benefits. Together they built something that honored the power of the Blackwood name while rejecting its darker legacy. They never returned to Whitfield, but the town felt their influence nonetheless. The solar project created jobs that revitalized the local economy. The old Prescott estate was converted into a training center for women learning business skills, and every Christmas, anonymous gifts arrived for the town's neediest families, always accompanied by exquisitely sewn blankets or clothing that the locals immediately recognized as Margaret's work. On David's 7th birthday, a package arrived at their home. It contained an old tape recorder and a note in unfamiliar handwriting, found among Michael's things in storage. Thought it should come to you. That night, after David was asleep, Emily and Adam listened to the tape together. It contained Michael Blackwood's voice, recorded shortly before his death. In it, he spoke directly to Emily, acknowledging her as his daughter and expressing regret for the life they never shared. Most surprisingly, he also addressed Adam, confessing the truth about his adoption and apologizing for the loveless upbringing he had provided. "I never knew how to love properly," Michael's voice crackled through the decades. "Perhaps that is my greatest failure. But in you two finding each other, against all my machinations, I see a chance for the Blackwood name to mean something better than I could make it." Adam sat in stunned silence when the recording ended. Emily took his hand, feeling the slight tremor in his fingers. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "All these years," he whispered, "I tried to be worthy of his blood, to prove I was a true Blackwood, and now to learn it was all a lie." "Not all of it," Emily said firmly. "You are a Blackwood, not by blood but by choice, by the empire you built, the legacy you're creating, by the name our son bears proudly." Adam looked at her, his eyes filled with a vulnerability he rarely showed anymore. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" Emily smiled, touching his face. "Because I see you. Not the heir, not the businessman, not the powerful figure everyone else sees, just Adam, my Adam." That night marked a final release for both of them. Emily from the shadow of her father's abandonment, Adam from the desperate need to prove himself worthy of a bloodline he never possessed. They were free to be simply themselves, defined not by their pasts but by the future they were building together. As the years passed, their partnership deepened. They had a daughter, named Elizabeth after the kind woman who had once treated Margaret like family. David grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's business acumen with his mother's moral clarity. The Blackwood name, once whispered, with fear and respect for all the wrong reasons, became associated with innovation and ethical leadership. Margaret lived to see her grandchildren grow into their teens, passing peacefully in her sleep after a life that had transformed from one of fear and secrecy to one of openness and joy. At her funeral, Emily wore a dress her mother had sewn for her, simple, elegant, a testament to the skill that had sustained them through the hardest years. "She saved us both," Emily whispered to Adam as they stood by the grave. "Her courage, her sacrifices, and gave me the greatest gift of my life," Adam replied, his arm around her waist. "You." On their 20th anniversary, Adam and Emily returned to Whitfield for the first time. The town had changed, grown more prosperous, more forward-looking, but the bones of it remained the same. St. Bartholomew's Church still stood in the square, its bell still calling the faithful to prayer. They visited Margaret's old shop, now converted into a community centre, where young people learned trades that could support them. They walked past the houses Emily had known all her life, some still occupied by families she had grown up with, others by newcomers attracted by the town's renaissance. As they strolled through the square, an elderly woman approached them, her face lighting up with recognition. "Emily Hayden," she exclaimed, "or I suppose it's Emily Blackwood now. I never thought I'd see you back in Whitfield." It was Mrs. Wilson, the town. Gossip now bent with age, but still sharp-eyed and keen to know everything. "Mrs. Wilson," Emily greeted her warmly. "Yes, it's Blackwood now, and this is my husband, Adam." The old woman looked Adam up and down, nodding appreciatively. "I remember when you first came to town. Caused quite a stir, you did. And now look at you two, the talk of business magazines and charity galas." "We've been blessed," Emily said simply. "More than blessed," Mrs. Wilson replied with a knowing smile. "Destined, I'd say. Even back then, watching you two exchange glances in church, I thought to myself, there's a story that's just beginning." Later, as they drove away from Whitfield for what both knew might be the last time, Adam took Emily's hand across the console of their car. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving all this behind, the simplicity, the community?" Emily looked back at the town receding in the distance, the church spire still visible against the mountains. "Not for a moment," she said honestly. "I loved this place, but it was a cage as much as a home. With you, I found who I was always. Meant to be." Adam brought her hand to his lips, kissing it with the same reverence he had shown on their first night together. "As did I, my love. As did I." That night, in a luxury hotel suite with a view of the same Blue Ridge Mountains that had watched over Emily's youth, they made love with the same passion that had marked their relationship from the beginning. 20 years had brought changes to their bodies, subtle lines around their eyes, a touch of silver in Adam's hair, the soft curves of motherhood on Emily's figure, but nothing had diminished the electric connection between them. "Do you remember what I promised you that first time?" Adam whispered against her skin. "That you would be mine forever?" Emily smiled, pulling him closer. "And I said you would be mine. We kept our promises, didn't we?" "Everyone," he agreed, his hands tracing the familiar contours of her body, "and I intend to keep them for 20 more years, and 20 after that." As they lay together afterward, watching the moon rise over the mountains, Emily thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a small-town seamstress and a man haunted by a false legacy, they had transformed into partners in every sense: business, parenting, love. The Blackwood name would continue through their children, but cleansed of its darker history. David. And Elizabeth would inherit not just wealth and power, but the example of two people who had faced their demons and chosen a different path. "What are you thinking about?" Adam asked, his fingers playing with her hair. "About threads," Emily replied softly. "About how lives weave together, creating patterns we can't see when we're too close to the fabric. About how what looks like a tangle can actually be the beginning of something beautiful." Adam smiled, recognizing in her words the wisdom of the woman who had once made her living with needle and thread. "And our pattern, how does it look from here?" Emily turned to him, her face illuminated by moonlight, as beautiful to him now as it had been that first day in church. "Like the most exquisite design I could ever imagine. Complicated, unexpected, and absolutely perfect." And in that moment, as Adam gathered her in his arms, Emily knew that the true inheritance of the Blackwood name wasn't the money or the business empire. It was this: the capacity to transform darkness into light, to stitch together broken pieces into something whole and beautiful, to love so deeply that it changed not just two lives, but all the lives they touched. From the church bell's echo that had called her to Mass that fateful Sunday, to this peaceful night in her husband's arms, Emily had traveled a distance measured not in miles, but in courage. She had discovered that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in the choices made when facing the darkest truths. And Adam, the man who had once thought himself defined by a bloodline that wasn't his, had found his true identity in the family he had created, in the love he had chosen, in the legacy he was building day by day. Together, they had rewritten the Blackwood story, turning a tale of secrets and manipulation into one of redemption and hope. And in doing